Jai Hind viewers, I am Sudhakar Dwivedi, Assistant Professor in Information Technology Department. And in today's also we are going to discuss the sublet that we have discussed in the previous lectures. In the previous lectures, we have discussed what is the sublet and how the sublet is used on the server side to respond to the users' requests. Also, we have seen what was the technology that we were using on the behalf of the sublet when the sublet was not available. And the previous lecture we have seen that we were using the CGI, Common Gateway Interface, to handle the request, and it was some disadvantages that to handle each request it may create a multiple process on the server side, and we know the server has some limitations to access these requests, to process these requests, so that it may create a bottleneck or overhead on the server sides. So, as a solution, we have provided the sublet on the server side that is entirely written in the Java, and how the sublets are used to handle these multiple requests on the server side. So, we have seen the CGI that we are using earlier has created a multiple processes to handle the multiple requests. But in the case of the sublet, it will not create a multiple process, but it may create a multiple threads. So, when the each request is coming, it may create a individual threads to handle the separate requests. So, in this image, we can, in this example, we can see here, there is a multiple request coming from the clients, and for each request a thread is created, and for there is only one instance, and for one instance there is a multiple threads. That means here is not a multiple process. The multiple process is not created, but a multiple threads of a process is created to handle a multiple requests. So, that may be a solution that we were facing in the CGI, that for each request a separate process is created. Here is a separate process is not created, here a multiple threads is created, so that a number of the requests can be processed on the server side. So, what is the advantage of the servlet actually? So, servlet have a web container that creates a threads for handling the multiple requests. It not creates a separate process, it creates a separate threads of to handle the multiple requests. And why the threads? Because the threads have a lot of benefits over the processes. What is the benefits? So, they share a common memory area. So, threads is a lightweight and share a common memory area, and cost of communication between threads are low as compared to the processes. So, we can see here there are multiple threads to handle the multiple requests on the web container. So, what is the main task of the servlet? So, the main task of the servlet is to read the implicit and explicit data sent by the web browser or the client side, then generate the results by processing the data on the server side, and then set the implicit and explicit data as a response to the web browser. Why we need this servlet? Why we require servlet, and why we are using only this servlet technology? Because the servlet have access to the entire family of the Java. As we have said, the servlet is actually a Java programs, and servlets are written entirely in the Java. That means it is all the benefits of the Java, and servlet have access to the entire family of the Java APIs, including the Java Database Connectivity API to access the enterprise databases also. So, using the servlets, we can collect input from the users through the web pages forms, present records from the databases or another source, and create a web page dynamically. So, first the request is generated, the request is created by the client side, and the server then receives this requests, then response is generated at runtime, and this response is then sent to the client. This is the high level architecture of the servlet. So, we can see here the HTTP request is created by this this client side program known as the web browser, and this request is then sent to the web server. and then this request is then transferred, this HTTP request is then transferred to a particular or a corresponding servlet to process the request generated by the client. This request then processed by the web container, and it may take the use of the databases also, and then is process the request, it generate the dynamic pages, and then transfer the response back to the web server, and this web server finally transfer the web pages to the client, and on the web browser on the client side the final web pages are displayed. So the web server receives the request and passes the request to the servlet container first. The servlet container forward this request to the corresponding servlet, as we have seen. The servlet process the request and generate the responses in the form of the output, and this process may require the communication to a database, as I have said, and may also invoke a web services or computing the response directly. After processing, the servlet builds the responses objects and send back to the web container. The servlet container finally sends the response back to the web server. The web server sends the response back to the browser, and browser displayed it onto the client's browser screen. So what is the basic benefits of the servlet? Servlet provides a better performance, as I have said, because it creates a threads for each request, not a process. So it provides a better performance because it creates a separate process for the each individual requests. Portability, because of the Java language is a portable, so we require the benefit of this Java language, and we can use and we can enjoy the portability, that means platform independent. It also a robust. Servlets are managed by JVM, Java Virtual Machine, so we don't need to worry about the memory leak or garbage collection at all. It is also secure because of the Java language. So these are the benefits that we can take, like the portability, it's a powerful, efficiency, it is more safe because of the Java. We can take the benefit of the integration of the another technologies. We can extend it. It is inexpensive, secure, and performance is also better. So how all this communication is handled by the Java, and how the servlets are initiated and executed in the whole life cycle, or the how the servlet is created and how the servlet is destroyed. And all these scenario, all these steps can be understood by the servlet life cycle. So servlet life cycle can be defined as the entire process from the creation of the servlet till its destruction. So the entire process when the servlet is created, and then finally by creating the dynamic pages, it finally will be destroyed, and this entire process till the creation and destruction is known as the servlet life cycle. And the following paths are followed by the servlets during his creation till the destruction process. So what we will use, the servlet initialized. First, the servlet is initialized by calling the init method. So in the servlet life cycle, it uses three methods actually: the init method, the service method, and the destroy method. So the servlet is initialized first by calling this init method. Then servlet call the service methods to process the client requests. And then servlet is terminated by calling the destroy methods. So in this servlet life cycle, it uses three methods: init method, service method, and destroy method. So first the servlet is initialized by calling the init method. Then the servlet calls the service method to process the client requests, and then servlet is finally terminated by calling the destroy method. And finally, servlet is garbage collected by the garbage collector of the JVM. So what will be the process on the web container side? So the web container maintains the whole life cycle of the servlet instance. The life cycle of the servlet is, so the servlet class is loaded. First the servlet class is loaded, and then the servlet instance is created. So whenever we have write the servlet class and we are ready to execute or run the servlet, so first the servlet class is loaded, and then the instance of the servlet class is created, and then these methods are called. First the init method is invoked, then service method is invoked, and then destroy method is invoked. We can see here. So first we'll have loaded the servlet, and we have created the instance and initialized, and then we will initialize this servlet by calling the init methods. Now when the servlet is initialized, it is transferred to the service method to handle the request by calling the do get or do post methods. So to process the request, the service method may use the do get and do post method. The service method is called, and this service method we will use the do get or do post method. Actually we override this do get and do post method to handle the request coming from the clients. And finally we have to unload the servlets. That means we are taking out of the service this servlet and destroy the servlet by calling the destroy methods. So what we will do, the sequence in which the web container calls the lifecycle methods is like this. First the web container loads the servlet class, and first what web container do? First the web container loads the servlet class and creates one or more instances of the servlet class. So firstly servlet class is loaded by the web container and one or more instances of the servlet class is created. Now the web container invokes the init method of the servlet instance. So when the servlet one or more servlet instance is created, and after that the init methods is invoked of the servlet instance during the initialization of the servlet. The init method is invoked only once in the servlet lifecycle. So this init method is it is called only once in the whole lifecycle. Then web container invokes the service methods. Then it invokes the service methods to allow the servlet to process the client requests. So to process the client request, the web container invokes the service methods, and the service method processes the request and returns the response back to the web container. So this is the service method that is responsible to process the request. This is the method that is known as the service method that processes the request and returns the response back to the web container. The servlet then waits to receive and process subsequent request as explained in the step 3 and 4. Then servlets is ready to access another request and prepare another response. The web container calls finally the destroy method before removing the servlet instance from the service. The destroy method is also invoked only once in a servlet lifecycle. So the init methods is invoked only once, the destroy method is invoked only once, and the service methods is invoked as per request created by the clients. So for each request the service method is invoked. So how we can create a Java servlet? So for creating a Java servlet we need some packages, we need some classes and methods. So we will usually use the Java servlet and Java X servlet HTTP package that contains various classes and interfaces for servlet API through which we can create the servlets. And these packages are the standard part of Java Enterprise Edition. As the Java X servlet contains the number of the classes and interfaces that are mainly used by the servlet container, and Java X servlet HTTP contains a number of classes and interfaces that are mainly used for the HTTP protocols. So the servlet lifecycle methods we can understand by this example. So this is the servlet container. This is the servlet container. We can see here. So when the servlet container receives the request initiated by the clients, then to process that request. Firstly, it called the init method to initialize the servlet. Then after initialization the servlet, it is transferred to the service methods, and service methods now override the do get or do post methods. And as for each request, a service method is called, and for each request, this will create a separate threads. So when a request is coming from the client, a thread is created. If another request is coming from the client, another thread is created. So each request and response is managed by individual threads. So when a request is came, it is initialized. Then this service method called the do get or do post method to process the request by creating individual threads. And then this request is transferred to the web server, and on this side the response is generated, and then response is sent back through the thread to the client. So we can see here the each request is handled by the service methods by creating a separate threads. So firstly we call firstly the servlet called the init methods. So whenever a user invokes the URL associated with a particular servlet, the init method is called. So whenever we have called for the particular servlet, or the request is initiated, firstly the init method is called, and it is called only once, not each time of the request is made. It is called only once. An instance of the servlet is created through the init methods. So through init methods, an instance of the servlet is created. Each user requests creates a new thread. As I have said, each user request create a new thread catching to get and the post requests. So this is the syntax of the init methods that configure or initialize the servlet. Now the service method is called. Then the web container called the service method. Each time there is a new request is coming from the client for the servlet. This is done by creating a new threads. That means for each request, to handle each request, the servlet creates a new thread. And in this method, it checks the HTTP request type. That means it's a which type of the request is get, post, delete, etc. And then calls accordingly do get, do post or do delete methods as per requests. This is the signature of this is the syntax of the service methods. So we can see here is a request object, servlet request object, and another is a response object. That means this service method can handle the request and the request created by the client side, and then it also can manage the responses that is created by the web server and can send the responses back to the client. Now this service method can override do get or do post method. And then finally it called the destroy methods. This method is called just once, as the init method is called first time to initialize the servlet. This method is called only once in the whole life cycle, and it helps to perform all the cleanup activities, including the closing the database connections and handling the background threads Then the servlet is removed from the container, and this is the signature of the destroy method. So servlet API lifecycle uses these three methods: init methods, service method, and this destroy methods. And this init method is called when the servlet is instantiated and must return before any other methods will be called. Service method called directly by the server when an HTTP request is received. Default service method calls do get or do post methods. And destroy methods called when the server shuts down. So by this example we can understand how this servlet works. So firstly, the request is generated. This request goes to the web server, and then by the web server, this request is transferred to the particular sublet. Then sublet has executed the requests and then send the response to the web server, and then final response is then sent by the web server to the web client. So we can implement the servlet in the following ways. First, we implement the servlet by implementing the servlet interface, or by extending the generate servlet classes, or by extending the HTTP servlet classes. So we can implement the servlet by three ways: by implementing the servlet interface, by extending the servlet generic servlet class, or by extending the HTTP servlet class. Thank you so much for today's class. Then in another class we will discuss how we can create the servlets and how we can deploy the servlet on the servlet side. Thank you so much.